Okay, once again, welcome everyone. It is September 23rd, 2021. My name once again is Gloria Chan. I'm the founder and head of school here at the Springwell School. And we are based on Colesville at 9525 Colesville, just within the Beltway. And I started the school because I have two little ones of my own, aged almost 7 and 3.5, and one on the way. And as I was looking at progressive, non-traditional schools in our area, I really found a lot of great options, in DC, farther in Bethesda, maybe farther north where there's more farmland, but not a whole lot of options when it came to within the Beltway in the Silver Spring area, the Tacoma Park area. So I really wanted to create an intentional community for the children in our neighborhoods to have an option for some progressive, non-traditional learning. So this is our beautiful campus. Our philosophy really is learning for life. And a little bit about my background. I'm born and raised in New York City to immigrant parents. I grew up wanting to change the world and be a voice for immigrant and minority communities, and found my way to DC. I spent about 7 years in advocacy. So I was on the Hill for 5 years and then off the Hill for 2 years, leading a national nonprofit for advocacy in minority and immigrant communities. The next 7 years was a different chapter as a professional coach. I coached people across the entire age spectrum, from recent college graduates to people who are transitioning out of their first jobs, to people who are transitioning to their first executive leadership positions, to retirees, and coached myself through all these transitions too, and found that I myself and most of the other grownups around me weren't quite well equipped for these transitions in life, to really get grounded about who we are in relationship to others, who we want to be in the world around us, in our environment. I found that traditional education, I had the best education you could possibly have. I went to a private school in New York City on scholarship. I went to Swarthmore College. I went to Harvard Law School, literally the best education money could buy in the world. And still, I felt ill-equipped to make these life choices for myself. I find that we traditionally are taught to learn knowledge, to memorize content, to memorize equations, historical facts, scientific content, and kind of regurgitate it and show grownups that we know it, without too much application to thinking about who we are in the world, without too much application of the knowledge to what we want to do with ourselves in the world. So it felt a little bit removed when I started thinking about the type of education that I wanted for my children and for the next generation in general. I thought to myself, we really need to better prepare our students for life in the current moment, in the 21st century, and for generations to come in the 22nd century. The world is so fast moving now. Industry, nonprofits, government, we no longer need people just to follow instructions. We need people who are adaptable, who can innovate, who can solve really challenging issues and problems. And we need people who can be quick on their feet. We know that people are transitioning jobs. People aren't staying in the same industry for their whole lives. They're transitioning every few years, depending on who you are. And so education should really start preparing our students for this type of world that's already here. At Springwell, that's exactly what we want to do. So everything that we do at Springwell is done intentionally to think about how is this preparing the child to live in this fast-moving, fast-paced world where they really have to be grounded in themselves, grounded in who they are, think critically, and be intentional about their lives. So we really activate the whole student. Student agency is at the heart of our school, very much student-driven, arts integrated, hands-on. We care about the outdoors. All this is to say that we want to prepare our students to be able to thrive in a world where they have so much getting thrown at them. A word about student diversity and staff diversity before we dig into our middle school reveal today. Over 55% of our student population is diverse. And I put that in quotation marks because in this context, what I mean is that 55% of the student population is non-white or has some heritage that is non-white. But we all know that diversity comes in so many different forms and colors and shapes. But here are some of the cultures that are represented in our school community. Students from Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, the Dominican Republic, from Argentina, from Vietnam, from China, from Taiwan, those with Jewish, French, Italian American, and German backgrounds. So it's a truly wonderful global mix. We love having our families and family histories and family stories and family foods integrated into the community. So for those of you who are looking for a close-knit community that's very diverse, you've come to the right place. And a bit about our team, our faculty and staff. We're also really diverse. I think it's a testament to who we are, what we care about, how we've attracted our staff. We have staff who, a little bit about our staff, 100% of our faculty hold master's degrees. They all have had 8+ years working with children. They're all multilingual and have global perspectives, meaning they've lived, they've traveled abroad, they've worked abroad. And 100% of our faculty and staff have been or are currently still entrepreneurs outside of the classroom. So we've had professional education consultants, coaches, a chef, a gardener, a marketing branding person. I mean, just people who, and this is incredible, we're proud of this because there's something very unique about entrepreneurs where they can think about who they are, what they want to do, and then bring it into reality, just poof, magically out of nowhere, bring their dreams to life. And that's really the spirit that we're trying to inspire into our students, especially our middle school program. So that brings us to unveiling our middle school Compass program. Currently, we have 2 classrooms serving kindergarten in the 1st grade, and then an upper elementary classroom serving grades 2 to 5. So next fall, we'll be launching our middle school classroom serving grades 6 to 8. And I think one of you mentioned in our introductions that middle school is a really difficult time. It is a time of change and uncertainty. It's a time of total awkwardness. And there's a reason for that, right? The children are shifting their identities from being, sheltered in their home life, whether they're the only child or a sibling. They're starting to shift their identities from being safe at home to kind of starting to explore the outside world. There are new peer relationships that come along with that start to redefine what's important to them or who's influencing them. And then, of course, there's these strange physiological growth spurts that are happening that need a lot of care and attention to make sure that our middle schoolers can navigate this time of change and uncertainty in a way that's empowering. And I think a lot of time I was talking with a parent that middle school sometimes feels like a cultural wasteland, that like middle school teachers are actually really unicorns. Like the ones that are really passionate about teaching in middle school are unicorns. Most people like to avoid middle school is kind of the sentiment that was coming up in this conversation. For us, we really want to hold this really unique space as an opportunity, not something to run away from. But really to hold the space for our middle schoolers to transition through this passage in the most graceful and empowered way possible. So that's really the intention behind the launch of the Compass program. So how do we navigate change and uncertainty? We do it by finding our way in a world of possibility. Like I said earlier, 21st century living. I don't know about you all, but I'm totally overwhelmed all the time on my phone. There's so much access to all this information, lots of options for different choices in life. So what we want to do for our middle schoolers is to really build the strong foundation, the strong personal compass where they can feel, even if they don't know all the answers, they at least know how to ask the right questions, to think about what matters to them, how they want to operate in the world. They can really reflect upon their choices, their friendships, their activities, their interests in a really intentional way. So this is really pulled from my years of coaching grown-ups, this idea of pulling values and passions and gifts and pulling them all together and creating this wonderful sense of agency, capability, competence. And even though this is something that humans need throughout their young adulthood, their adulthood, and even into their third chapters, this is something that's very unique to the middle school age experience, because this is the first time that they as human beings are really trying to sift through their personal identity in a very independent way. And so this, even though this is useful for all of us, this is especially important for this particular age group as they're just starting to navigate who they are, who they might be, test out different identities so that they can navigate confidently in the world. So we're really pulling out who they are in terms of what they value. There's a lot of time for reflection. We see their passion and their interest through the student-led work, where the teachers are going to be skilled at coaching them in their gifts and their strengths. And we're going to help them piece it all together so that they feel like they can have some agency and impact in the world. So the idea is not to be, only navel gazing and narcissistic. It's also to make space to understand that, oh, these are my values and they sound really different from Miss Malkia's values. And that's okay. Like we can exist in this world, in this school, in this community together, caring about different things. And, I feel like even when I was, so passionate about racial justice, I used to turn my head a bit to the students who were so obsessed about the environment because I just couldn't get out of my head. I couldn't realize that we're all on this planet to do different things and to really honor each other. And I really want that for our students at Springwell to be able to say, yes, I am passionate about this one thing, and you're super passionate about your thing. And this is great. Like, this difference is wonderful. So it's not just who am I, but like, who are you? And how do we both relate to the world? And if it makes sense to collaborate, how do we collaborate, right? So this is the type of life skill that we're really trying to teach the students, because these are things that they can take into adulthood, into their personal relationships, into their workplaces, into their leadership positions as they progress in their careers. These are life skills that will help them thrive. So just a little sneak peek on what that actually looks like in the classroom. So we're thinking about 360 real world exposure and a continuation of our love of project-based learning that we started in the elementary classrooms. So think about Shark Tank meets Model Congress meets STEM and Arts Expos, where students are exposed to business, government, STEM, arts, nonprofit, academia, and more. I think about our current parent community and our future parent community, and there's so much genius that is just hovering around our school that we're really excited about incorporating parent expertise, community partnerships, community guest involvement to expose the students broadly to what's out there in the world. And students then turn this exposure, they pick up what they're interested in and turn their interests and ideas into impact-driven projects. So they'll be doing projects all throughout. Even in our elementary school, we do projects galore. But the 6th, 7th graders will definitely have opportunity to have project-based learning. But there's going to be a buildup in the 8th grade where they'll have their Compass capstone project. And it's really important. The very first thing is that this reflects their own personal compass. So a lot of times, even when I think of like college portfolios and people gathering their after school activities and enrichment to show colleges, show off how great your kids are, I've seen that happen, as I was coming into high school in these elite private schools. And a lot of times it's kind of empty. People are just checking boxes, playing the cello, saving the world somehow. But I've seen them and they didn't actually care about any of it. So for us, it's not just important that they tick off all the boxes, but I want to know, I'm going to evaluate the students on whether they actually care about what they're doing. Tell me, how does your project reflect your personal values? Tell me how it reflects your passion and why you're passionate about the topic area. Show me how it reflects your gifts. And that first and foremost is going to help me understand whether this capstone project was a success. The second piece they'll be evaluated on is how academically rigorous was your project. How did you incorporate your exploration of life sciences or physical sciences or engineering into your project? How well did you incorporate cultural studies into your project? How deeply did you do a historical dive into how this problem came to be? And then finally, something that I'm really excited and proud of is that they'll be evaluated on their 21st century skills. They'll be evaluated on their leadership and their planning, how much forethought they put into their project, budgeting and basic finance. I think I spent most of my 30s and even now trying to figure out, how to run a business. But why start in your 30s and your 40s, right? Why can't our students learn the basics of finance and budgeting so that they can use real applied math to make their ideas come to fruition? Communication skills is another really important piece of this. Not only written language, visual presentation, integrating those arts and using the arts as a powerful communication tool. Looking at digital communication and video communication, which is so important these days. How well did you collaborate? How well did you reach out to the community? How well did you leverage your classmates' gifts? Your adaptivity, how well did you fail? How well did you actually learn anything? Did you learn anything? Or did you just do what was easy because you're great at it? Did you learn anything? Did you make an impact? And this bullet, even though it's like at the tail end, is so important. We're seeing so many like 9-year-old kidpreneurs, and their parents are pushing them to be more and more successful, more and more famous. So for us, it's not just about showing off how talented and great our kids are, but it's also how are we teaching them balance? How can we teach them that it's not a rat race? How can we teach them to breathe, to care for themselves, to enjoy one another, to enjoy the process, to enjoy the outdoors, to take breaks? So we're really trying to develop a whole person here that is knowledgeable of themselves, makes space for others, and feels competent to make a difference in the world around them. So this is what our middle school program is all about. With that, I'm really excited to introduce Ms. Malkia Zimbi, our assistant head of school. She's got 20 plus years in education, 10 years teaching in all kinds of different schools, public, private, and charter. The last 11 years in Maryland as a lead Montessori teacher. She's going to talk a little bit about how academics is going to play a role in all of this weaving together of our project-based learning. Ms. Malkia.
Awesome. So yes, I mean, that was great, Gloria, and well done. Obviously, you know, to take care of the whole child, we actually need specific skills, right, to develop. And so we do that at Springwell by, you know, we have a tracking system where we go through the Common Core to make sure certain skills are met. And so you should know that even though we're doing this interweaving, the skill sets that's needed to do that, we do actually manage as well. Of course, you know, to take care of the physical person, the emotional person, the social, and the cognitive does take unicorn hands, Gloria, right? It takes all of us to be that magical, you know, with our wands to actually make it happen. And especially the student, right? It's holding a space. We know that the more mathematical they are, you know, then they'll have more reasoning and good judgment and things of that nature. So, you know, that's what we're here to do. Okay, so here's how we do it. So with everyone from our K students all the way to our 8th graders, we always do pre and post assessments. And so we have 3 sessions a year, right? And so we have the fall, we have the winter, we have the spring, and we actually start everyone where they're at. So, you know, our goal is to have fluidity, especially around language and math, and I'll show you some of the set foundation skills. But you know, we do not want to isolate students based on their age or their grade level. We want to, you know, if we have a 4th grader who's ready to do geometry, we want to have that kind of fluidity based on their understanding and based on their academic, you know, achievement. So pre and post assessments is something that we do ongoing to check to see, because, you know, certain students, they're doing different clubs, they're acquiring knowledge all the time anyway. And so we want to make sure we are following and tracking that individual student. In addition, you know, we always are doing observations between all the staff in the building as well as the teachers. We're always looking, right? You know, what's happening physically, what's happening emotionally, or socially, what's actually, you know, when they are failing, what are the set skills, or what's the process that they go through in order to bring them back up, right? We don't believe that, you know, just because you fail at this one moment or this assignment, that it's actually, a bad and wrong. It's actually a process of learning. And so it's like, okay, what set skills do we need to provide for you so you can help yourself, right? That's the goal. We have student portfolios. Even our kindergartens, as adorable as they are, we do have portfolios, and that they, say, hey, this is my best work, right? This is my best work for this semester, and this is what I want to show and share in the whole peer community, as well as the staff, as well as all the teachers, right? Which is also goes to our gallery walks. In the middle school program, those gallery walks obviously would be more peer review, like, hey, here's more questions I have about the topic that you're interested in. Could you research a little bit more about that? Or could you actually do more visual, so learning how to be able to critique a peer without it, without feeling like it's a judgment on their character, but rather, hey, this is how I improve my work, right? I need feedback, right? Because I might have a set mindset of how this is going, but how does it impact my communication to someone else? How is, my presentation? And so having that trust and development between the peers is what we're planning to do with our middle school students, especially at that age, at that time period, which is a big deal. Because, middle schoolers are going through so many different kinds of emotions, but valorization is what they need. And if they can have that among their peers, and I do believe with the capstone project, it's going to be pretty awesome. So their feedback that they get from their peers is only a source of self-discipline, right? A sense of like, oh, okay, that was super helpful. Now I can, and their ability to work with others. Anyway, I think I'm jumping a little bit. Yeah. And so obviously we also have progress reports that we do, and that's what we share with the parent community per cycle. Obviously strong math skills before going into the 6th and 7th and 8th grade agenda. We want to definitely make sure that they have a great foundation, a really solid foundation that we do check, right? And that we do test for eternally, right? We don't do standard testing, national testing, but we definitely do our own testing to make sure that those skills have been mastered, such as the fractions, integers, things of those natures, to make sure that they know how they have the problem-solving strategies to do the other work. Okay, we want to make sure, what's the reason we do math is to make sure you have reasonable skills to be a critical thinker, right? To be able to look at both sides of things. So, yep. Okay. So some of the skills, right? So when we go into 6th grade, generally is intro to pre-algebra, right? 7th grade is generally algebra 1. And then 8th grade usually is geometry. Now, the reason I just generally put these topics here, because we don't really know where your student is going to place, right? I've had 4th graders who are ready to go into algebra 1 because, their parents have had them in, both of their parents, by the way, in that case, were mathematicians. And so obviously I couldn't encapsulate them or hold them based on their age level, but really based on their understanding. But in the middle school program, they'll be either entering the pre-algebra program, the algebra 1, or the geometry. Okay. And then, as far as science and social studies, especially life science, earth science, engineering, and even a little bit of biology, our goal is to expose that to them in per cycle. Right. So in the fall cycle, the winter cycle, and the spring cycle, they'll have an introductory level, right, of each one of those core subjects. So there'll be an introductory level 1 year, intermediate level, and then an advanced level. So I think the exposure for these type of sciences per year will happen. So if you have an 8th grader that comes in, they'll have an exposure to physical science 1 semester. And the semester, by the way, is about 12 weeks, right? So 1 semester, and then a life science the following, and earth science the 3rd semester. Now, of course, just like just like all of our other subjects, it is, they can advance based on their level and where they're at around the sciences. Yeah, this is another example. Oh, did you want to jump in? Oh, no, okay. This is just an example of some of our students who obviously they got so super interested in doing transistor, oh, I can't even say the word right now. But anyway, building the radios at the end of last semester. And they just, you know, we follow the students, we really do. And if they're so passionate, interested in a particular thing and how something works, we're going to get all the materials into and let them lead and continue to build and develop and research and find out how to do what they're passionate about. That is what we're about at Springwell. Obviously, we do have environmental education. We have our own garden that's flourishing that the students generally, you know, we have,
Yes.
we're cooking at least every 6 weeks, we take from our garden, and we're making a specialty meal anyway around our continental studies. The students do get a chance to harvest. And for some of the parents who are with us, we also know, you know, that we also give you a harvest bag if you would like on Fridays when we are in our garden. But, you know, being a part of the earth and understanding where our food comes from is so important for students. And so, you know, having our garden is only one element of that. Yeah, and then our language skills, obviously literature and, you know, our writing skills and making sure that a student can read from different genres in the middle school is vital. And making sure they can understand the author's perspective, or how to connect to the text itself is what we're looking for. And so, you know, even in our in our elementary classrooms, we have daily reading, we have silent sustained reading. So, you know, at that moment in time, they can definitely have their own personal reading. But in our middle school program, our goal is to expose them to many different types of genres, especially, you know, nonfiction, right? So for some of our students, there's a level of informative genres that they don't like, but, you know, in order to learn how things work, you need to actually understand, you know, the purpose and how to interpret informative writing and reading. So as far as our writing skills in the middle school, we are definitely focused on persuasive, informative, and argumentative writing. Our goal is by the time your student, once they enter 6th grade, and then they leave the middle school program, that they have a sense of mastery. They're either on intermediate or advanced level for each one of these genres of writing. Of course, if we have an 8th grader who comes in, they will be exposed to each one, and we'll see where they're at and to advance them as much as possible within that year. In regards to responding to literature, we want to make sure they have a sense, they're able to discern, right? Like, hey, what is the author's perspective based, you know, how do I look at the character and the story and able to interpret, you know, what they're saying based on what they're doing. That kind of comprehension, not just reading. We want you to read fluently, there's no doubt. However, we want you also to understand what you're reading in depth and able to, so you can write from, you have a literary response from. So it's like bringing yourself to the text, seeing yourself from the perspective of the author, and then coming out of that and saying, hey, does this work for me? Does this not? You know, can I look at the character's physical, emotional, social, and cognitive ability as I'm reading this text? That's the kind of literature advancement we want our students to have, whether they like the text, whether they like the reading or not. We want them to be able to do that skill, you know. Obviously, research and skills is already part of our student-led projects from the beginning, from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade. And then as they are in the middle school program, we expect it to be more advanced and be able to do that. So in the 8th grade, for middle school, we want them to cite their sources. They'll learn a little bit of that when they're in 5th grade or so, right? Like, hey, these are my references. Let me show you what I get my sources. But by the time when you're in our middle school program, we actually want you to cite it. We want you to source it. We want you to, use the technology that you have available to actually be able to frame everything that you have. We don't want them to wait until they're in middle school, until they're in high school to be, to this be a new introduction for them. Instead, we want to expose them now so they can be more advanced. They don't have to wait. They don't have, and we'll follow them based on how far they want to go. If they want, the further they want to go, is how deep we will travel with them, because we're on a journey together.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Malkia, for that. And all of you I'll make sure to leave time at the end for questions. Just going to go through some logistics, application process, and all of that information, and then we'll open it up. So COVID-19 protocols, we have been very cautious on campus, requiring negative COVID-19 tests required for the entire household. When households take trips, we also work individually with each family to make sure that testing is safe, the timing of the testing is safe before they come back on campus. Attendance and sick policies, temperature checks, doing hand washing routinely in the classrooms as part of our daily rhythms, mask wearing, of course, for everybody, social distancing, and cleaning and disinfecting. Currently, all of our staff members are fully vaccinated. So I know that's one question that we get a lot. We've been able to stay open for last year through this year. I think we only went virtual for 3 weeks time. 2 of those weeks was to quarantine as a school because there was a positive test case. And then 1 week was precautionary after our spring break to prevent any need for longer quarantines. So we were able to stay open for most of the school year last year, and we're really proud of that. There was no community spread because of the practices that we put in place. I wanted to mention about enrollment caps. So next year, these are our numbers. For lower elementary, we'll cap at 11 students. Upper elementary will cap at 15. And for middle school, we'll cap it at 10. And we want to keep these numbers low so that the students really have the faculty attention to build those relationships with their and connections with their teachers, but also with their peers. And of course, if we're in a COVID environment still, keeping those numbers low will be important. We have sliding scale tuition. So in addition to our wonderful ethnic diversity and racial diversity in our class, we have broad socioeconomic diversity as well because of our generous sliding scale tuition. We don't want any family to feel like they have to be turned away because we're a non-public school. Tuition is determined for each household. Unless you opt out of the process, you would pay full tuition. And you have 3 different payment options: all at once, in 3 sessions, or 10 monthly payments. We operate on rolling admissions. So if you know that you're interested and you know that there are only 10 seats in middle school next year and you want to apply early, we definitely encourage applications. So because we're having this open house, if you apply within the next week, by the end of the month, September 30th, use the coupon code EARLY2022 and we'll waive your application fee. You'll spend the month of October submitting your academic financial records if you want to take advantage of sliding scale. You'll meet with Ms. Malkia in October, and we'll come together as a team and make some early admissions decisions by November or December of, before the end of the fall session. We'll have some early admissions decisions. So with that, I'd like to end the presentation here and have some time for questions. We have about 12 minutes. Any questions or comments? I know we have a lot of current parents here too. So if you have questions for current parents, those are welcome as well.
So hi, this is Nani. So not a question per se, but just a rolling concern for me for like rigor, because um the projects, the capstone projects, all that is fantastic if it's for me, if it's additive, right? But the part of school that we take for granted, which is the repetitive work, like knowing, like really knowing things like by heart, like doing it so much that's sort of part of you, is sort of what I personally don't want it to get lost in the mix, because our kids will have to compete in the world, right? And um, it's, I guess it's my own personal challenge to just make sure whatever they learn, they retain. And I just don't want us to take that rigor for granted. Um, so I don't know. That was just one of my concerns that I just wanted to put out there.
Which is a valid concern. Thank you, Nani, for bringing that up. You should know middle school definitely will have homework. I mean, currently our upper L do not have homework, our fourth and fifth graders, but we do plan to ease it into them, very shortly, because we're doing placement exams this week. And so the ideal scene, fourth to eighth, will have daily homework for that kind of competency and practice. So they know that they know, that they know, and they're doing that. For K to 3, we're not looking to do daily homework. We want them to read, right? We want them to practice, but not in that same rigorous way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's I feel like kids learn from good and bad experiences.
Yes,
I'm not saying we should,
yes.
Expose them to bad experiences, but I don't think we should be afraid to push them and challenge them, because they need to know who they are when they face a challenge. Do they shrink from challenge, or do they face up to it? They also have to build that resilience. I know we try to like treat our kids with kid gloves all the time, but I don't necessarily think that's always helpful. I think we shouldn't be afraid to push them, to challenge them, to give them things that they may even fail at initially. But for them to learn that they can fail and they can get up and they can, try again. And I just want to put that out there.
Yeah,
so.
And we're in agreement. Just know that
Yeah.
we're just developing relationship, right? That's why we're doing the kid gloves right now, because as a community, we're developing relationship. We're developing how to connect. We're developing to see what their strengths are. How do they maneuver? How do they, and in a different kind of way for these first 6 weeks or so. But have no fear that we are planning to do just that. When they do fail, because they will at some point, right? We want to make sure we have the set skills to know them enough to help them come out of it. Like, hey, okay, great. I get it. This didn't go well for you right now. Great. How about use these skills right here, or be able to suggest things and techniques that they can do. And more importantly, their will to try again. You see, without a relationship with us, right, in the school community, they might be a little more resistant to try again. And we really want them to get back up, because you're going to fall, get back up and try again.
Yeah. And one thing I iterate all the time with staff is that one of our core philosophies or approaches is balance. So we're never going to sway too far one end or the other. So just because we love student agency doesn't mean that we also don't love, mastery and discipline and the sense of like self-confidence that comes with knowing something so deeply. So for us, it's going to always be a balance of extremes, right? We're never going to fall on one pole or the other.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions? No other questions? I'm going to stop the recording because maybe you all are shy. Hold on 1 second. Goodbye, those of you who are watching the video.